HMAS Diamantina, 1963. This recording was made in November 1999 by Rear Admiral Geoff Bayliss, retired, and accompanies the video of 8mm movie films made in 1963 when I was a surgeon lieutenant on board HMAS Diamantina during an oceanographic survey carried out in the Indian Ocean. The ship at that time was based in Fremantle, Western Australia, and the oceanographic survey was carried out on the 110th meridian of longitude from about 400 miles west of Fremantle up to south of Java in Indonesia. The ship proceeded through the Sunda Strait to Singapore to refuel, and there are some scenes of exercises with the Royal Marine helicopter. On this tape there is also a section showing some scenes from the RAN relief operation to the victims of the Mount Agung volcano disaster in Bali in the latter half of 1963. HMAS Diamantina delivered about 5 tons of Red Cross supplies to the port of Buleleng on the northern side of the island. I shall now comment on the sequence of the scenes in the video as they occur. The first sequence relates to a Westland Wessex helicopter of the Royal Navy, which was manned by Royal Marines based at Sembrauang in Singapore. This exercise took place in Johor Strait between Singapore Island and the mainland of the Malay Peninsula. The helicopter circled the ship, and the exercise was to pick up personnel from the quarterdeck of Diamantina by winch, and then after a circuit of the ship, the personnel were returned on board again by winch. I was one of the ship's company who was treated to a quick flight around Johor Strait courtesy of the Royal Marines. Interestingly, after the exercise was over, we learnt that this was the winch operator's first solo attempt at winching live personnel from the deck of a ship underway. We were pleased to hear that he passed his test. The next sequence on the tape shows first of all the ship's engineer officer, Lieutenant Roger Gray, who moved aft to the winch position on the quarterdeck, which, if I remember correctly, was on the starboard side. As an oceanographic frigate, this was really a key piece of equipment for Diamantina, and this was the position from which about 9,000 meters of wire were streamed by the oceanographic team as part of their research studies of the Indian Ocean. Naturally, not all of this line was streamed at one time, and it depended on the depth of the ocean at any particular position how much wire was streamed. At approximately 100-meter intervals on the line, a sampling bottle called a Nansen bottle was clipped, and then when the required amount of line had been streamed, a device called a messenger, which was like a shuttle, slid down the wire and opened the bottles at depth. This permitted sampling of deep ocean water at depths of 100 meters intervals. The second messenger was then sent down the line, which closed the bottles at depth, and then the winch operator retrieved the bottles as they came in. Samples of ocean water were then collected by the oceanographers, labeled and classified and stored for further more detailed analysis back in the CSIRO oceanographic laboratories. The next sequence shows a sampling net which was streamed at comparatively shallow depths for organic marine life such as plankton. In the following sequence there is a record of the flight of an albatross which had been following the ship. These large seabirds are very common, particularly in the southern reaches of the Indian Ocean, and they frequently follow ships living off scraps that may be ditched from time to time. The seaboat drill sequence is shown to illustrate the activity that takes place when a seaboat has to be lowered to recover some object fairly close to the ship. This procedure is also followed in the case of man overboard routine in relatively calm seas. This drill is quite a manpower intensive operation compared with more modern recovery methods where inflatable craft are used. Following the seaboat drill, there is a shot of the navigator, Lieutenant Colin Bartlett, going to the bridge. For a small ship with a ship's company of less than about 100 men, Diamantina was unusual in that it had a specialist navigator, and this was because accurate position fixing was required for the oceanographic work. One must remember that this work was done in the days before satellite navigation, and the personal skill of the navigator was a key component to accurate position fixing of the various spots of the survey. I have a sequence on the tape here of the seaboat under sail, and this took place around a drift station which was set up, if my memory is correct, a couple of 100 miles, nautical miles, south of Java. The drift station was essentially a buoy which just floated in the ocean and had a variety of oceanographic data collecting devices on board to measure seawater temperature, wind direction and strength, etc. And while it floated around during daylight hours, the ship merely had to keep it within sight. We had 2 reserve officers on board at the time. They were given the task of rigging the seaboat as a sailing whaler and sailed around the ship while we were keeping an eye on the drift station. This next section of the video is just a quick look at sextant navigation, which, as I mentioned earlier, was the only technique used to determine the ship's position when in open, non-pilotage waters. A specialist navigation officer usually had the skill to fix the ship's position within approximately 1 mile of its actual position on the surface. HMAS Diamantina, in the final oceanographic cruise of 1963, diverted to the northern coast of Bali in Indonesia to land 5 tons of Red Cross supplies to the victims of the Mount Agung volcano disaster. Mount Agung had erupted some time earlier and caused very significant loss of life in the hinterland of the port of Buleleng on the north coast. Numbers killed in the eruption were counted in the thousands, and a very significant number of the remaining population were evacuated to other islands in Indonesia. Among the Red Cross supplies were about 100 weight, that's roughly 50 kilograms, of eye ointment used to treat the after effects of volcanic dust in the eyes of many of the Balinese. There had been some political tension about this time in Jakarta with the burning down of the British embassy there, but fortunately these political repercussions were not noticeable in Bali at the time of our visit. The local Indonesian naval authorities provided 2 motor vehicles for some members of the ship's company to visit a lake in the hinterland of Buleleng, which was situated quite high in the mountains. In Dutch colonial times, this lake was quite a resort, and we had lunch at a guest house on the shores of the lake, and I recall we were offered Czechoslovak Pilsner beer, which presumably had also been a hangover from the Dutch colonial period. Agriculturally, the land was quite intensively cultivated, and I have shown a few sequences of rice paddies which we passed through on our way to and from the port. The final sequence on this video was taken as the ship transited Sunda Strait. If my memory is correct, the first small island shown is Temperang, and the lighthouse on the island is quite a significant landmark. The conical island next shown is Krakatoa, which in the 1880s erupted rather violently and blew about a cubic mile of earth and rock off the island. This was one of the most violent volcanic eruptions of modern times and caused an enormous tidal wave with an incredible amount of destruction in the islands in Sunda Strait and also in neighboring Java and Sumatra. The immense dust cloud from this eruption was spread far and wide, and I seem to recall reading that part of the dust cloud was even recorded in northern Australia at the time. The final shot of the video shows Diamantina heading back to the open sea of the Indian Ocean after transiting Sunda Strait with a course shaped for return to Australia.